On this episode of the Story Detective, we're going to be doing a Q&A. This Q&A is due to my reaching 1,000 subscribers and the thank you post that I posted a couple of videos back. That's what's coming up on today's episode. Stick around. These first 4 questions come from Eva Wrights. Which living literary influence or author would you love to see among your fans? If your work was inspirational enough for them to call you a fan, that would be an honor indeed. I think if I could actually talk to someone at this point and have a conversation, it would probably be Neil Gaiman. Now, Neil worked at DC Comics at the same time I did, and his book, The Sandman, was considered the best written book that DC Comics was putting out at the time. No surprise there. I was working on my first monthly book called The Ray, which is this character here. And to get any kind of acknowledgement for your first monthly project with a big company is definitely an accomplishment, and I did get acknowledgement for working on that book. However, before social media, he built up his platform of fans through his writing in comic books, and by the time he started writing novels, he already had a platform before there were platforms. I would say Neil chose more wisely than I did, but he also had a bit more experience. So having that conversation where he talked about things and filled in gaps between then and now, and possibly some things that he doesn't normally talk about with everyday fans that he just learned along the way and shares with other writers, I think that would be an informative conversation indeed. Question number 2. Did you come this far only to come this far? No. I don't think anybody does. If you get to that point where you become maybe a legend in your own mind and you think you know everything and you become complacent, what follows complacency is death, because you're not growing and evolving. And life and creativity is always growing and evolving. So to come this far, that would be a huge mistake, I think, for myself or anyone really. Question number 3. What does your ideal writing session look like? Ideally, if I sit down and I get in that zone, you know, those moments where everything seems to be flowing and you could spit on the page and it would look perfectly fine. You're in tune with the universe and everything feels great. That's my ideal writing session, because they don't happen every day. And it's something that I've talked about with creators for years, that if we could bottle that and somehow market it or have it available all the time, that would be great. But then maybe it wouldn't be so special, so maybe it shouldn't be bottled. Question number 4. Do you think success drives success? I know someone who does work in the comic industry. They were good at what they did. There's no denying that. And they were also very fast and reliable. When you're working on a monthly deadline, being reliable is huge, because editors will call on you. Even if your talent isn't amazing, reliability is a thing that every editor needs. So this particular person would get multiple jobs because they were fast. And they were fast enough to keep the quality relatively high, which is another skill all in and of itself. The end result of having that much work is you could call this person at 2, 3 in the morning and he's still going to be in his studio working, because work is his existence. You put in a lot of hours doing this just to do one monthly book. To be able to do 2 or 3, this is a lot of work. Fortunately, his significant other was also a type of artist. They said if not for having that shared space and the in-home studio, they would probably rarely see one another. So their work is their life. The success and the ego behind it definitely fuels it, or I don't think this person could keep up with the amount of work and the amount of time put into this stuff. And here's where it gets tricky. I have talked to people. I have talked to this person, I've talked to friends of this person, I have talked with fans who talked to this person. And they've come to me after and said things like, they seem like they're a pretty nice person, but during the course of the conversation, they've said things like, yes, I received this award for my artwork, and I got that award because I am the best. And they'll be like, does he know what he's saying? Does he have any clue how that sounds? And my answer is yes. He knows how it sounds, but to build himself up to fuel that amount of work, and it does fuel it, he has to ride that adrenaline wave, believing himself to be on that level where he's considered the best works for him. Does it work for him in all aspects of his life? No, but it definitely does fuel his ability to continue forward with his success. He's definitely one of the best. Is he the best? Again, there's a danger in that. But if that's what fuels your day to day and keeps you going so you can keep a roof over your head, keep your longevity, and keep doing what you're doing because you love it, then you're definitely fueling your own success through riding that wave of your ego, even though that ego, when you speak, is so natural to you. You're playing it in your head all the time that you say it without even thinking about it. And then people are like, who is this person? What are they saying? Do people really talk like that? Yeah, they do. The next two questions are from Laurel Webb. What advice do you have for giving characters unique and recognizable voices? It's not just one thing. There are things that you can tag to their speech. Actually, it's called speech tags. And that is kind of a dictionary for each of your characters. If there's certain words that are common to them, maybe they use certain kinds of sayings or a gruffness of speech. Finding that voice is a matter of finding the words that only that character is going to speak. It's not so much thinking about the attitude that's in their head when you're writing it. It's word choice. If you don't choose the right words that convey that attitude, then it's still going to be in your head and not on the page. So that comes through in dialogue. And I'm going to be doing a dialogue video relatively soon, it may be next week. And Laurel's next question is, pineapple on pizza, yes or no? If you're going to have a buffet where there's a variety of pizza and I picked up a slice of pineapple pizza and ate it, I would think, okay, it's not the worst thing in the world. But if I went out to dinner and I was ordering a pizza to be my meal, it would not be pineapple pizza. The next two questions are from Alyssa Markins. And her first one is, how do I find all the Authortube accounts? The Authortube channels that I have found have come from looking at the Authortube newbie tags. Some I've just fallen on their videos. I also have my significant other that watches Authortube, and sometimes she will see a particular person and say, hey, here's a channel you need to go watch. A lot of them in the beginning came from Sarah Scharnweber's videos because she's been doing her whole YouTuber video thing for a long time, and I think that's an invaluable resource that Sarah needs a lot more credit for. And if you haven't seen her YouTuber videos, watch them and subscribe. Alyssa's next question is, what's your favorite part of the book creation process? And I don't know that I have a favorite part. When I'm in tune with it, all parts have their own glorious kind of creating moments. The next question is from Lisa Daly. What are your plans for that manuscript you've been editing? I plan to self-publish. That's the route I've been thinking about since I started fast drafting this series, and the reason I'm trying to get ahead on it, because self-publishing requires that at least within the first year you follow up with a book or two relatively soon. You don't want to put a book out and wait for the next year because that's just not something that's working in that market. It could work, and it should work if a book has a quality that people remember. And I think no matter whether you're self-publishing or traditionally publishing, quality rises, and the people that have done it well from the beginning all had a little something more on the ball than just the average person that was tossing together a story like a salad and putting it out there. Get it right and then get it out there is my plan. The next question is from Joey Paul. So what drew you to Sherlock Holmes as a character? First, I think it was the fact that he had that deductive reasoning. And I was kind of fascinated with that because as an artist and a writer, I was always observing. And observing human nature, you kind of become a student of human nature. There's always a puzzle to be solved. And we're always putting things into our memory banks. And Sherlock Holmes, it seemed, had gotten a little bit farther along and turned that into a science. As I got more into the original canon, I discovered that there were a lot of questions about the character. He had a lot of flaws and a lot of problems that just weren't answered by Conan Doyle because he didn't care enough about the character to do those stories. For a long time, it was considered almost a bad thing to write a Sherlock Holmes novel. If you had a thesis on that character as to filling in those gaps, write a pseudo-biography and then lay your theories down on that, and maybe some people would be taken seriously, because the people that were Sherlock Holmes fans, while they might read those, didn't always read the Sherlock Holmes novels because they were considered pastiches, and the purists only wanted Conan Doyle's work. The next two questions are from Danny Ranger and Z Falk. Those answers are connected, and I want to kind of deal with them both at once. Danny Ranger asks, have you considered bringing your comic book skills into your channel in some form? And Z Falk writes, are there any tips for storytelling through illustrations, or maybe how you pair illustrations and writing? The answer to both of those questions is yes, and that's going to be also in future videos. But in terms of doing sequential art compared to what goes on the page and in the panels and what goes on the written page, there are some parallels. And that's why I encourage people to go out and look at film, comic books. Any form of storytelling has parallels, but within those parallels, there's also some differences and some answers. And also people ask me to share some stories about my comic book journey and what that industry was like. When I first came to Authortube, it's not like I made a big secret that I didn't work in the comic book industry, but I didn't sit here and say, well, I've done this, or I've worked on that, or I've worked with this person, because I didn't want to feel like I couldn't be approachable. Let's put it that way. And I was also a little bit divorcing myself from all that because I was going in a different direction. There's good things and there's bad things about the comic book industry, and some of it I didn't know if it would affect my writing. There were people that I know that are literary authors that said comic books might be something looked down on. So I was a little bit afraid to mix the two. Now, things that I've done, this character, remember the Ray? He's used in TV shows on the CW, animated movies. I still occasionally get royalty checks, and this was my first job with a bigger company. I don't own this character. While Neil Gaiman did the best written comic that DC Comics was putting out during that era, The Ray was considered the best looking comic book. I definitely had something to do with that. We helped put this character on the map. There's a lot of stories. I've worked on a lot of mid-range comics that sold anywhere from 18 to 25,000 a month. And I've worked on other books that have sold well over 100,000 copies globally. So my work, whether it's published and the artwork that I got back from that, is in collections all over the planet. I know this because I sold it to people all over the planet. My art rep was stealing from the till. I had arguments with him because I suspected this, and when it came out, everyone was trying to sue him. And I took my artwork back, and for a while I was selling it on my own, so I shipped it all over the planet. I've always kept an attitude that whether I'm selling artwork or whatever I was doing, I engaged with people, I talked to people, and they appreciated that. They want to know that there's a human being on the other side of this. That's most creators in the real world. On YouTube, it may have a different aura for some of the gigantic YouTube platforms because they have almost a rock star mentality. With most people in the entertainment industry, is not a thing that's becoming. It's not looked on unless you're a gigantic name by agents and editors as someone they want to work with. They want somebody that they can work with, that's going to go out and actually engage with people. A long story, and maybe I've said too much on this answer. The next question comes from Kent Sean. How do you balance writing for the market with writing what you're passionate about when it comes to novel length genre expectations and Amazon algorithms? Amazon algorithms are one of those things that they're always changing. To balance the algorithms and consider what they're doing now while I'm writing my book is not going to get me anywhere, because if I try to match up with those algorithms in 6 months from now, it's going to be completely different. The keywords and all that other stuff for the searches help, but is it going to sell your book if it's no good? No. work on quality first, focus on your writing first. Writing for the market, that's a tricky question. But it's a bit of a sand trap as well, because if you stay in that genre, you can very well understand it, but how do you go about making it different than everybody else's? This may be the best example that I can think of, at least one of my favorites in terms of writing for a market. When Dennis Lehane first started publishing his mystery series, it was a well-written mystery series. There was nothing wrong with the writing. It was entertaining, but it also fit right within that typical aspects of the genre. When he wrote stories like Shutter Island, he took it to the next level. And how did he do that? He started writing the type of imagery, prose that sounded more literary. It still had all the elements of a mystery, but now he elevated his game. He was not writing to that standard typical market that he began in. And what happened to his writing is he skyrocketed. Those things sold more than probably his other series combined. And that's because he went beyond his genre and he looked at things. He looked at good writing in other places and he brought that into the genre. Did it change his genre? No, but it sure as hell upped his game with his writing. And I think that's how you do it. Quality, again, rises. And if you have a platform and you're putting books out, don't be complacent. Don't think you're the best. Look to always be better. You're always learning. The more you know, the more you know. It goes with rule number 2 that comes right after understand your genre is read widely. In fact, I think that might be rule number 1, because they'll tell you to read widely and then they'll tell you to go read everything in your genre. So you could spend years not reading widely. And then finally you get to a point, and like I said, we've all been here. Hundreds or thousands of other writers haven't done and slipped into that same sandpit. Is years later, you find that you may be very good in understanding your genre, but you don't understand how to make that level rise. And then you start reading other things. And then you start saying, wow, here's some answers I didn't know about. This person knows something that I think is amazing in terms of prose. This genre has things that are amazing in terms of certain aspects that could very easily leak into fantasy, but fantasy's not using it. Why? Because they're not reading widely. Because whether you're a professional or just starting out, I can't tell you the number of people that are stuck in their genre and actually becoming snobs about their genre and not learning and growing. Don't do that to yourself. That is the sand trap you want to avoid. This question comes from CO Savvy, and she asks, how did you determine what content to put on Authortube? Was it trial and error, or did you always have a vision of what your channel would be? I knew I always wanted to talk about writing because when I first came to Authortube almost 2 years ago, almost nobody was talking about writing. I thought, here is a platform for writers, and the unspoken rules were almost making people afraid. Your opinions are just as valid as everybody else's. Don't be afraid to find your voice. If you're here sitting on this platform and somebody is holding you down and you can't speak and find your voice, you're not going to find your voice in your writing. It's going to inhibit you there as well because you're going to think you're not good enough there. Nobody thinks they're good enough. Clue number 1. So I wanted to try to encourage people, and that has always been the underlying theme of my channel. If you can encourage people, you can be accessible to people, you can give something back to the community, then the community prospers and you prosper too, because we all learn from one another. And the final question comes from Gary Karp. What advice would you give to someone just starting their YouTube journey? Since I've been here, I've seen a lot of people that did this for a couple of months or whatever, and some only lasted for a few weeks. And that was a shame because I really liked some of those channels and I really liked some of those people. So don't give up. Keep following your dreams. They may take a while. This is why it's important for you to enjoy the journey, enjoy your writing, enjoy what you're doing now, because enjoying your craft and your project is really what it's all about. But the community is here, and the community is a lot bigger and stronger than it was 2 years ago. There are opportunities for you to become a part of this community that I didn't have coming in. and that some of the other people that gave up on their channels didn't have. We get out of the community what we put into the community. So don't be afraid to make yourself heard. Don't be afraid to talk to other people. You'll make some connections. Learn to give, find a balance, and until we meet again, keep those keyboards clacking.